They call me Major Jonathan, J.D. Davis, but most just stick with J.D. Simpler. Less of a mouthful when things are going sideways. Which, in my line of work, they often do. I'm a Special Forces operator. A Green Beret to be precise, though the beret itself spends more time packed away than on my head these days. For 15 years, I've been Uncle Sam's problem solver in places most folks only see on grainy news reports or in spy thrillers. I've seen my share of ugly, dealt with situations that would make your average civilian's stomach churn. But nothing, absolutely nothing, could have prepared me for what awaited in the remote steppes of Kazakhstan. The initial briefing was sparse, deliberately vague, the kind that always sets your teeth on edge. Disturbance, they called it. A quaint term for something that required a Tier 1 acid a much to be pulled from a much needed R&R in Germany and rerouted to a desolate corner of Central Asia. The location was a small, isolated village named Aidentau, which I later learned meant Golden Mountain in Kazakh. Quaint name, too. The last communication from Aidentau had been a garbled, panicked transmission, picked up by a listening post 3 days prior. It spoke of shadows, of screams in the night, and of something not of this world. Then silence. Complete, unnerving silence. My team was a skeleton crew for this one, just me, Sergeant First Class Marcus, Mac Reynolds, our comms and tech wizard, and Corporal Lena Hansen, our medic and resident linguist, fluent in Russian and a smattering of Turkic dialects, including Kazakh. We were a tight unit, worked together on a dozen similar, sensitive assignments. Mac was built like a small tank, quiet and methodical, his fingers dancing over a keyboard with the same lethal grace he handled his rifle. Lena, barely 5'5", was a deceptive powerhouse, calm under pressure, with eyes that missed nothing and a dry wit that could cut through the thickest tension. We were inserted via Aashalo, jump under the cover of a moonless night, the vast, empty landscape of Kazakhstan stretching out beneath us like a dark, rumpled blanket. The air was bitingly cold, even for early autumn, carrying the scent of dry earth and something else. Something metallic and faintly unsettling, like old blood. We landed a few clicks out from Aden, Tau's last known coordinates. The silence of the steppe broken only by the whisper of the wind through the sparse, hardy grasses and the soft crunch of our boots on the unforgiving terrain. Anything, Mac, I whispered into my comm, my breath misting in the frigid air. We'd been trying to raise Aidentau since we hit the ground. Negative, Major, Mac's voice crackled back, low and steady. Still radio silence. No heat signatures on thermal either. Not from this distance. Place is cold, literally and figuratively. Copy that. Let's move, keep sharp. The approach was tense. Every shadow seemed to writhe, with unseen movement. Every gust of wind carried phantom whispers. The stars above were brilliant, cold and indifferent, offering no comfort. We moved in a standard wedge formation, rifles up, senses on high alert. The terrain was mostly flat, occasionally broken by low, rolling hills. There was no cover to speak of, leaving us feeling exposed, vulnerable. As we crested the final rise, oaking the valley, where Aidentau was supposed to be. An involuntary shiver traced its way down my spine, and it had nothing to do with the cold. The village, or what was left of it, lay shrouded in an unnatural stillness. No lights, no smoke from chimneys, no barking dogs, no signs of life whatsoever. It was as if the entire place had simply ceased to exist, leaving behind only a ghostly outline. "Major, you seeing this?" Lena's voice was barely a breath in my ear. "I see it, Corporal." "Mac, any change?" "Still nothing, sir. No signals, no movement. It's dead." The word hung in the air, heavy and ominous. We descended into the valley cautiously, the silence pressing in on us, amplifying the sound of our own heartbeats until they hammered in our ears like war drums. The village was small, a collection of perhaps 30 or 40 single-story dwellings, mostly constructed from mud brick and rough hewn timber, typical of the region. A dusty, unpaved track served as the main street. The first thing that struck me was the smell. The metallic tang I'd noticed earlier was stronger here, mingled with something else, something acrid and deeply wrong, like spoiled meat and burnt hair. It was a stench that bypassed the nose and went straight to the primal fear center of the brain. "Masks on," I ordered, my own voice sounding muffled through the filter. We didn't know what we were walking into: chemical, biological, or something else entirely. The houses were dark, their windows like vacant eyes staring out into the oppressive gloom. Doors hung ajar, or were missing entirely, revealing glimpses of shadowy interiors. There were no bodies, no signs of a struggle, no bloodstains, no discarded weapons. Just emptiness, an eerie, profound emptiness that suggested not just an absence of life, but an erasure. "This is messed up, JD," Mac muttered, his usual stoicism replaced by a note of unease. He swept his sector with his rifle, mounted light, the beam cutting a swath through the darkness, revealing only more desolation. "Stay focused," I replied, though my own gut was twisting into a knot. "Hanson, anything stand out to you? Culturally, I mean. Anything that looks out of place, ritualistic?" Lena shook her head, her eyes scanning every detail. "Nothing obvious, Major. It's just abandoned. But not like people packed up and left. More like they vanished." We moved methodically, clearing each structure one by one. The interiors were as disturbing as the exteriors. Possessions lay scattered, as if dropped mid-use. A half-eaten meal on a table, covered in a thick layer of dust. Children's toys abandoned in a corner. Clothes neatly folded in a wooden chest. It was as if time itself had frozen, and then everyone had simply evaporated. The only building of any significance was a small, dilapidated structure at the center of the village, which we assumed was some kind of community hall or, perhaps, a makeshift mosque. The door was heavy, made of thick, dark wood, and surprisingly it was closed, locked even. "Mac, see if you can get that open." Quietly, I instructed. Mac nodded, pulling a set of picks from his vest. He was an artist with locks, a skill he'd picked up in his misspent youth, or so he claimed. As he worked, Lena and I kept watch, our backs to him, covering the silent street. The silence was the worst part. It was inactive, malevolent thing pressing in, making the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. I've been in firefights so loud they ruptured eardrums. But this silence was a different kind of assault, a psychological warfare that gnawed at your sanity. After a few tense minutes, there was a soft click. Mac pushed the door inward, revealing an interior plunged into absolute blackness. The smell here was even worse, a concentrated wave of that same putrid, metallic odor, so thick it was almost visible. Lights, I commanded, stepping forward, my M4 carbine leading the way. The combined beams of our flashlights cut through the oppressive darkness, and what they revealed made my blood run cold. This wasn't a community hall. It was a charnel house. The term, charnel house, barely scratched the surface. What lay before us was a scene of such grotesque, systematic butchery that it defied any rational explanation. The room was circular, the rough stone walls curving around a central, raised platform. And on that platform, and scattered around it, were remains. Not bodies, not in any recognizable sense. These were piles of bone, stripped clean of flesh, arranged in bizarre, almost artistic patterns. Skulls were stacked in neat pyramids. Femurs and tibias laid out, like spokes of a wheel, ribs interwoven to form macabre baskets. There was no blood, no gore. Just the stark white, yellow of bone against the dark, earthen floor. The air, thick with that gag-inducing stench, was also strangely dry, as if all moisture had been sucked from the room. Sweet Mother of God, Mac breathed, his voice a horrified whisper that seemed sacrilegious in this unholy place. He was a combat veteran, had seen things that would break most men, but even he was visibly shaken, his face pale beneath his balaclava. Lena made a choked sound and took an involuntary step back, her hand flying to her mouth. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me, a cold dread gripping my insides. This wasn't the work of any human agency I knew. No army, no terrorist group, no psycho cult indulged in this kind of meticulous desecration. Hanson, you okay? I asked, my voice harsher than I intended. She nodded, swallowing hard. Yes, Major, just processing. Her eyes, wide with a mixture of terror and a medic's clinical detachment, scanned the horrific tableau. No soft tissue. None. It's like they were dissolved. Or eaten clean. But by what? There are no teeth marks on the bones. Not that I can see from here. And the smell, it's not just decay. There's something else, something chemical. Mac, get some readings. Air quality, any radiation, anything anomalous. I ordered, trying to push past the initial shock, to force my brain into tactical mode. This was an unknown, and unknowns were dangerous. Mac unslung his sensor pack, his movements stiff, almost robotic. Roger that, Major. Running full spectrum analysis. I moved cautiously deeper into the room, my rifle light probing the shadows. The sheer volume of bones was staggering. Dozens of individuals. Men, women, children. The smaller skulls were unmistakable. The entire population of Adintao, or what was left of them, was in this room. The silence from outside seemed to seep in, amplifying the soft clicks and whirs of Mac's equipment. Anything? I pressed, my gaze fixed on a particularly unsettling arrangement of spinal columns intertwined like grotesque vines. Atmosphere is weird. Major, Mac reported, his brow furrowed in concentration as he stared at his device's screen. Oxygen levels are slightly depressed. Trace elements of ammonia, sulfur compounds, and something I can't identify. Definitely not a standard CBR nagen. No elevated radiation levels, though. He paused, then added, and there's a faint, fluctuating EM field. Very low frequency. Can't pinpoint the source. An unknown atmospheric compound, and a strange electromagnetic field. This was getting stranger by the minute. Hansen, any theories on the cause of this? I gestured vaguely at the bone piles. Lena had moved closer, her initial revulsion giving way to professional curiosity, though her face remained grim. She knelt beside a pile of smaller bones, careful not to touch anything. The bones are incredibly clean, almost polished. No signs of tool marks, no charring. If it was an animal, it would have to be something incredibly efficient. Something that could strip a body to the bone in minutes, without leaving a trace of its passing. Or, as I said, a chemical agent. A highly corrosive one, but selective. It targeted soft tissues, ligaments, cartilage, but left the bone intact. I've never seen anything like it. The transmission, I said, the garbled words echoing in my memory. They mentioned shadows, screams, something not of this world, superstition, mass hysteria. Max suggested, though his voice lacked conviction. He clearly didn't believe it any more than I did. Maybe, I conceded. Or, maybe they were trying to describe something they couldn't comprehend. I looked around the room again. There were no obvious entry or exit points, other than the door we'd come through. The stone walls were solid, unbroken. Whatever did this, how did it get in and out? And where did it go? Suddenly, a low hum emanated from Mac's sensor pack, growing in intensity. Major, that EM field is spiking, and I'm picking up movement. Outside. Hostiles. I snapped, my weapon instantly up and ready. Can't tell. Thermal is still blank. No visual on the perimeter cams we set. But the ground sensors something is out there. Multiple contacts, moving fast. Too fast for human. The air in the Charna house seemed to grow colder, the metallic stench more pronounced. A primal instinct screamed at me to get out to run. But we had a mission. We needed answers. All right, team, I said, my voice low and urgent. We're not staying in this tomb. Mac, pack it up. Hansen with me. We fall back to the main street. Find a defensible position. We need to see what we're dealing with. We exited the bone room. The oppressive atmosphere clinging to us like a shroud. Back in the deserted street, the silence felt different now, charged with an unseen menace. The stars, which had seemed indifferent before, now felt like cold, watching eyes. We took up positions in the doorway of a relatively intact house, offering a good field of fire down the main track. Max set up his gear, trying to get a clearer read on the contacts. They're circling the village, Major, he reported, his voice tight, fast, very fast, and they're not on the ground. The sensors are picking them up a few feet above it, above the ground. My blood ran cold. What the hell are we dealing with? Mac, I don't know, sir. But they're closing in. Then we heard it. A sound that didn't belong in this world. It wasn't a growl, or a shriek, or any animal cry I'd ever encountered. It was a chorus of whispers, sibilant and dry, like sand rustling over bone. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, slithering into our ears, under our skin, chilling us to the core. The shadows in the village seemed to deepen, to coalesce. Shapes moved at the edge of our vision, too quick to focus on. Fleeting and insubstantial, yet undeniably there. The air temperature plummeted, our breath pluming in thick white clouds.
Contact!
Lena hissed, her rifle trained on the far end of the street. I followed her gaze. A patch of darkness, deeper than the surrounding night, detached itself from the side of a building. It wasn't solid, more like a ripple in the air. A heat haze in reverse. It glided forward, silent and swift, a few feet off the ground, just as Mac's sensors had indicated. As it drew closer, I could make out a vague, humanoid form, tall and impossibly thin, its limbs too long, its movements unnaturally fluid. It had no discernible features, just a shifting, shadowy silhouette. What in God's name? Mac whispered, his finger hovering over the trigger of his own weapon. Hold your fire, I commanded, my heart pounding against my ribs. Let's see what it does. My training screamed at me to engage, to neutralize the unknown threat, but something held me back. This wasn't like any enemy I'd ever faced. Firing might be useless, or worse, provoke an attack we couldn't counter. The shadowy figure stopped about 50 yards from our position, hovering silently. Then another detached itself from the darkness, and another, until a dozen of them stood arrayed before us, silent, watchful, their mere presence radiating an aura of profound dread. The whispering sound intensified, swirling around us, a cacophony of dry, rustling voices that seemed to claw at our sanity. This was what the villagers had heard. These were the shadows they had seen. And I had a sickening feeling that we were about to find out what had happened to their flesh. A heavy silence descended upon us again, with only the hoarse whispers still swirling around us, like a swarm of invisible flies. They stood motionless, those distorted humanoid figures, staring at us with an unseen perception that exuded a palpable pressure. I felt cold sweat seeping from under my balaclava. This wasn't the kind of confrontation we'd trained for. There was no operations manual for this situation. Major orders. Lena's voice trembled slightly, but her eyes remained fixed on the target, her finger steady on the trigger. I swallowed the thick saliva in my throat. Maintain distance. Observe. Don't fire unless you're certain it's a direct threat, I said, my voice low but firm. Mac, anything new from the sensors? They don't have a clear physical structure, Major, Mac replied, his voice tinged with confusion. More like a conglomeration of some kind of energy. The EM field density around them is extremely high, but I still can't clearly identify its composition. And the temperature around us is dropping rapidly, sir. It was true. The air around us grew colder and colder, to the point where I could clearly see my breath and that of my team, even though this was Kazakhstan in autumn, not the North Pole. This cold was unnatural. It seeped into our bones, causing uncontrollable shivers. Suddenly, one of the shadow figures moved. It didn't walk, but floated towards us slowly, silently, without a sound of footsteps. Only the whispering growing slightly louder as it approached. I raised my rifle slightly, ready to fire. Lena and Mac did the same. The shadow figure stopped about 20 yards from us. It was still just a distorted shadow, but I could feel a gaze, even though it had no eyes. Then, the unexpected happened. The dense blackness that formed its arm extended slowly, the end of the arm spreading out, resembling an open hand, but with no fingers. No details whatsoever, just a similar shape. "What is it doing?" Lena murmured. Before I could answer, the whispering rose again. This time it wasn't just meaningless rustling. There were words mixed in. It was a language I didn't know, but Lena flinched slightly. "Do you understand it, Hansen?" I asked immediately. Lena frowned, trying to concentrate. It's not like any language I've ever heard, Major. I feel like I can understand some of the meaning. It's not words, but feelings. Thoughts transmitted directly into my head." She swallowed. They are communicating." "What is it saying?" Mac asked anxiously. Lena closed her eyes for a moment, as if trying to decipher a complex signal. They're asking who we are, why we're here. They are displeased that we've trespassed into their sacred place. Sacred place. That bone room. The thought sent shivers down my spine. "Tell them we're soldiers. We came to investigate an unusual incident. We have no intention of disturbing them," I ordered. Lena nodded. She stood still for a moment, then spoke in Kazakh. I guess she was trying to use the closest local language to communicate back, even though she didn't know if they would understand. When Lena finished speaking, the shadow figure before us flickered slightly. The whispering rose again, this time sounding angrier and more threatening. Lena turned pale. "They don't believe it, sir," she reported, her voice trembling. "They say we smell of death. They say we are destroyers, like the ones before. The ones before." Did she mean the villagers of Adentau? "Ask them what happened to the villagers," I ordered. Lena tried to communicate again, but this time the shadow figure didn't respond with words. It slowly raised its other hand like appendage. Then, all 12 shadow figures began to move simultaneously. They didn't charge, but slowly spread out, gradually encircling us. The whispering grew into a deafening roar that drowned out all other sounds. It pierced my ears, making my head throb.
Major, they're surrounding us!
Mac yelled, trying to see through the darkness and confusion.
Hold your positions! Prepare to fire!
I barked out the command. All previous hesitation gone. This was a clear threat. The moment I spoke, the nearest shadow figure lunged. It moved so fast it was almost a blur. I squeezed the trigger of my M4, a burst of rounds erupting from the muzzle. The muzzle flashed momentarily, illuminated the shadow figure more clearly. It showed no reaction to the bullets whatsoever. They seemed to pass right through its body, without causing any damage.
Bullets are ineffective!
Lena shouted after firing a burst from her own weapon. "Damn it," Mac cursed. He fired his shotgun, the sound deafening. The buckshot spread out, but it was the same story. The shadow figure was unfazed. It continued its advance. I felt an icy chill radiating from the shadow figure as it got closer. Its outstretched hand-like appendage reached for me. I dodged just in time, feeling an intense coldness brush past my sleeve. The area it touched felt numb and searingly painful at the same time. "Fall back!" "Into the building!" I yelled, firing suppressive shots at the other advancing shadow figures. We retreated into the same house we had used as an observation post earlier. Max slammed the door shut and tried to find something to barricade it with. The whispering was all around us, seeming to come from every corner of the building, even from the walls and the floor. I felt like I was going insane. They're coming in," Lena said, her voice panicked, her wide eyes fixed on the old wooden door, which was shaking violently as if something was pounding on it from outside. "Mac, status report," I ordered, trying to keep my voice from shaking. "They're all around us, Major. Sensors are picking up energy signatures everywhere. The concentration is extremely high. I've never encountered anything like this before." Suddenly, a window shattered, sending shards of glass flying. A shadow foot flowed through the broken window into the room. It moved quickly, heading straight for Lena. "Lena, look out," I yelled, pushing her out of the way. The shadow figure shot past where Lena had been standing just a split second before. I fired at it again, but it was useless. Despair began to creep into my mind. We were fighting an enemy we couldn't see, couldn't touch, and our weapons were utterly useless. We were trapped in a deserted village, in the middle of the desolate steppe, with creatures that shouldn't exist. "We have to find a way out of here," I said, trying to think of a way to survive. "Mac, can you contact base? Request reinforcements, air support, anything." Mac shook his head despairingly. "Signal's heavily jammed. Major, I've tried, but nothing's getting through. We're cut off. Cut off. No escape. Surrounded by a horde of shadow demons. This really could be the end for us." But I wouldn't give up easily. I was a special forces operator. I was trained to survive the worst situations. Look for another way out.
Windows, a back door, even the floor.
There has to be an exit.
I yelled, scanning the dark, cramped room. The pounding on the door grew heavier. The wood began to splinter. Another shadow figure was trying to break in. We were running out of time. The splintering wood of the door exploded inwards with a deafening crack, and another shadow form flowed into the already cramped space like a tide of sentient darkness. The whispers intensified. A maddening chorus that felt like it was thickly scraping against the inside of my skull. The temperature in the room plummeted further, frost beginning to creep across the remaining window panes. "No way out that way," Mac yelled, scrambling back from the ruined doorway, his shotgun barking twice. The blasts momentarily illuminating the swirling chaos, but having no discernible effect on the new arrival or the one already inside. The creature that had entered through the window was advancing on Lena again, its formless appendage outstretched. I shoved her towards what looked like a rickety set of stairs leading to a small, dark upper level.
Upstairs.
Go. There was no time for debate. I laid down a stream of fire from my M4, not hoping to hit anything, but to create a momentary distraction. A wall of noise and muzzle flashes. The bullets ripped through the shadowy forms, leaving no mark, no hesitation in their advance. It was like shooting at smoke.
Major, this is insane.
Lena cried, already halfway up the narrow, creaking steps. Mac was right behind her. I backed towards the stairs, still firing, feeling the icy aura of the creatures closing in. One of them, the one that had come through the door, swiped at me. I felt that same searing, numbing cold rake across my left arm, even through the thick material of my combat shirt. A cry of pain escaped my lips, the limb instantly feeling heavy, unresponsive. The pain was incredible, a deep, burning ache that went straight to the bone. JD? Max shouted from the top of the stairs, his face a mask of alarm. I gritted my teeth, ignoring the agony, and hurled myself up the last few steps, turning to fire a final, useless burst down into the darkness below, before Max slammed a heavy, wooden trapdoor, shut, plunging us into near total blackness. There was a flimsy-looking bolt, which he fumbled with for a second before ramming it home. We were in a low, ceilinged attic, dust thick in the air, the only light filtering in from a single, grime-covered window at the far end. The sounds from below were muffled but still terrifying, the constant, sibilant whispering, and now a heavy, rhythmic thudding against the trapdoor. My arm. I gasped, cradling the injured limb. It felt like it was on fire and packed in ice simultaneously. Lena was instantly by my side, her small flashlight beam cutting through the gloom. Let me see, Major. Her voice was tight with concern. She carefully cut away the sleeve. The skin beneath was a horrifying mottled gray, cold to the touch, with angry red welts already forming where the creature had made contact. Frostbite. Some kind of energy burn. God. I don't know what this is. She pulled out her mech-kit, her hands working quickly despite the tremors I could see running through her. This is going to hurt. It did. The antiseptic she applied felt like liquid fire, but the pain in my arm was so intense, it barely registered as a separate sensation. Mac, that window, I said through clenched teeth, nodding towards the far end of the attic. Is it a way out? Mac was already moving, his own light scanning our surroundings. The attic was small, cluttered with discarded junk, old crates, broken pottery, bundles of dried herbs hanging from the rafters, their scent mingling with the ever-present dust. Looks like it leads to a lower roof section, Major. Might be a sheer drop after that. And they'll see us the second we break it. The thudding on the trapdoor intensified. Splinters of wood rained down. It wouldn't hold for long. We don't have a choice, I said. Those things, they don't just kill you. That touch, it felt like it was draining something from me. I remembered the bone room, the bodies stripped bare. Was this how it started? A touch that leached the life, the very essence, from its victims. The EM field, Max said suddenly, his voice sharp with a new thought. He was tapping frantically at his wrist-mounted device. It's strongest around them, obviously. But there are fluctuations, null points almost when they pass near certain materials. What materials? I pressed, hope flaring amidst the terror. Hard to say definitively in this mess. Iron, maybe. Dense metals. And there was something odd when we were near that central building, the bone room. The ambient field was different there, almost amplified in a specific way, but also contained. Contained. Lena looked up from tending my arm. What do you mean? Like the building itself was acting as some kind of conductor or shield. The readings were clearer inside that room, less chaotic than out in the open or in these wooden shacks. Mac shook his head. I don't know. It's just a theory. But if we could create a strong enough counter field, or disrupt their own. The trapdoor groaned, a long crack appearing down its center. One of the shadowy appendages, blacker than the surrounding darkness, forced its way through, writhing like a snake. No time for theories, Mac. We need to move. I pushed myself to my feet, my injured arm throbbing, but the adrenaline was a potent painkiller. That window is our only shot. Lena, you first. Mac, cover her. I'll be right behind you. Lena didn't hesitate. She scrambled over to the window, using the butt of her rifle to smash the grimy glass. The sound was shockingly loud in the oppressive silence, punctuated by an angry hiss from below. As she cleared the jagged edges, a wave of the cold, whispering air washed into the attic. Clear to the lower roof, she reported, peering out. Looks like a 10. Foot drop to the next section. Then maybe another 15. To the ground on the far side of the building. It's away from the main street. Go. Lena slung her rifle and squeezed through the narrow opening. Mac followed, his shotgun pointed back towards the trapdoor, which was now visibly buckling. It was my turn. I glanced back at the trapdoor. Multiple shadowy tendrils were now forcing their way through, the wood groaning in protest. I took a deep breath and launched myself towards the window. The pain in my arm was a dull, throbbing counterpoint to the frantic beating of my heart. I emerged onto a narrow, sloping roof section, the cold night air hitting my face. Lena was already at the edge, looking down. Mac was helping her. Below us, the ground looked impossibly far away in the darkness. The whispering was louder out here, swirling around us, as if the very air was composed of their malevolent voices. And then I saw them. Not just below us, but on the main roof of the building we were trying to escape. Two of the shadow figures were gliding towards us, their forms indistinct against the starless sky, but their intent chillingly clear. They had anticipated our move, or perhaps they were simply everywhere.
We've got more company!
I yelled, fumbling with my M4, trying to get a grip with my injured arm. We were exposed, trapped between the creatures on the roof and the unknown drop below, with more of them, undoubtedly, pouring into the house beneath us. The frying pan and the fire had become a multi-layered nightmare. There was nowhere left to run.